Hello, friends. I'm Colonel Jason Fettig, and this is the President's Own United States Marine Band. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Rehearsal Hall. This is a very special episode because we are focusing on John Philip Sousa's masterpiece, The Stars and Stripes Forever. The Stars and Stripes turns 125 years old this year, and we thought it would be fun to do an episode about the Stars and Stripes. The Marine Band plays the Stars and Stripes a lot, so we're not really going to rehearse today, but rather do a little bit of a show and tell about some of the things that we think are special about this march and some of the special ways that we perform this march, modeled after the way Sousa performed it himself. I hope you enjoy this. Let's dig in. Okay, everybody, right from the top, please. Good. So right out of the gate, Sousa hits you right from the very first note. So unison, and the percussion comes in a little bit later. And in the first strain of this march, something interesting happens. I think when we think of a Sousa march, we think of strong, martial, military character. But the reality is that Sousa actually often infused a lot of dances into his marches. He loved songs and dances, and that comes into play a little bit later as well. Listen to the very first rhythm of the opening of the first strain. Can I just have the melody, folks, for a moment? Melody of the first strain with the pickup. 1, 2, 1. Good. Can we slow that down? Let's go bop. Bop, 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 bop. 1, 2, 1. You know what that is? That's actually a tango rhythm. There's a little bit of tango infused. Jump, ba bum, 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 ba bum. And when we speed it up, it becomes something different, but it still has that light character, which is very important to bringing this first strain to life. The other thing that's interesting about the way we play Sousa marches is in the articulation. It's not too long, it's not too short. There's a real shape to the way we play these notes that also makes a Sousa march jump off the page. Let me show you what I mean. Can we play that again long at tempo? Play them a little longer with the notes. 1, 2, 1. Now let's do it super short, really dry. 1, 2, 1. Yeah, neither one of those really works. Too short, too long, doesn't work. So what we do is we try to infuse a bounce to the way we articulate. We hit it with a good front to the note and let it resonate and kind of leap off of that downbeat, just like this. 1, 2. It makes all the difference in the world. And we articulate Sousa marches that way all of the time, with that kind of bouncing from note to note and letting it kind of lift off after we hit each articulation. Something else interesting happens in this first strain as well. Listen to the tubas, the way that Sousa originally intended this. Just play these as half notes, guys. 1, 2, 1. That was the original bass line, but then he went back and he changed it to what's actually in the music now. 1, 2, 1. He thought that the half notes were a little bit too boring, so he embellished it with the 16ths in between. And the euphoniums are playing there too, and they actually play a dual role. They play with the basses, but they also have some of the melody that's stuck in between. Can you guys play again and play your full notes? 1, 2, and... Excellent, thanks. And the last thing that's important in this first strain is the dynamic contrast. So Sousa was a master at drama, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. But the pianos and the fortes really were spread out in a way that made this march much more interesting to listen to if we played it all at the same dynamic level. We're going to go through the first strain again, and then we'll get into the second strain. Pickups to the first strain. First time. 1, 2, 1. So there's a couple of things happening here. The first one is a very common performance practice that we do with nearly every Sousa march, which is that the second strain, first time, we take out a bunch of instruments and we change the dynamic from the printed forte to piano. So all of a sudden, after the first strain, everything drops out and it's a much more gentle sound. And then when the repeat of the second strain comes in, everybody comes back in as originally printed in the music and plays forte. Now, Sousa never wrote these things down in his parts. His bands just knew that he liked to change the performance practice, and they would do it automatically. We've since put it into our music, so we know exactly how we're going to play these marches. The other thing that's really cool in the second strain that happens is, I don't know if you noticed this, but the beat gets turned around. We're used to marches being 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. In the second strain here of Stars and Stripes, Sousa goes 2, 1, 2, 1. He flips it entirely. And the way we perform it is to bring that out even more. Listen to this one more time. First time through the second strain. 1, 2, 1. Now, why is that important? Well, Sousa was a master at surprising people with accents and the percussion that weren't written there, dynamic changes, dramatic shifts in character, but he was also a master at playing around with rhythms. And sometimes by reversing the rhythm of what people expected, it would make their ears perk up a little bit more. And that is certainly the case here. This 2-1-2-1 thing is going to come back a little later in their march too, so stay tuned. When we do the second time through the second strain, you hear it really emphasized because we add accents in the percussion on those twos to make the point absolutely clear that this is a 2-1-2-1 section. Let's do second strain and into the trio, please. Second strain, second time, into the trio. 1, 2, 1. So you can hear it, right? The 2-1-2-1. Sousa often wrote melodies that had what we call a leading tone underneath. So ya-dee, da-da-da, 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 half step down. And in this case, in Stars and Stripes, he actually put an accent on that half step down to not only shape the melody, but to emphasize that we're still in this 2-1-2-1 kind of feel. The other thing that's important to remember about Sousa's marches is that the trios were essentially always songs, in most of his marches, I should say. So he really wrote music that was supposed to feel like it was being sung, which added even more contrast to the rest of the march, which was a little bit more up-down. These trios are more lateral. They're more kind of the song going across the beat. And in this case, I think Stars and Stripes, this trio really is in one. It's a feel for every bar. If you needed proof for that, we could add back in the percussion parts that we don't play in the trio. They're out, but they actually have parts written and they sound like this. Percussion, can you play right at the trio for me? Here we go, 1, 2, and ah. The bass drum mostly is just on the downbeats, giving this feeling of every beat of one per bar. Now, when we add the melody into that and take the percussion back out, you can feel how this becomes a much longer, more melodic line. This is as printed as we play it. 1, 2, 1. That is such a cool sound if you can achieve that contrast and make that trio sing. And when we get to the break strain in just a few minutes, that makes the drama of that entrance and the brass coming back in along with the percussion all the more effective. We're going to keep playing now. Trio again one more time, and we'll keep going. 1, 2, 1. So the purpose of the break strain was to get us out of this mode of this beautiful song-like trio and kick us back awake and set up the final version of the trio, which is the last strain of the march. Sousa's marches always have drama in their break strain. Sometimes he does it with orchestration, changing different choirs, kind of competing with each other. Sometimes it's just with the harmonic and melodic motion of the break strain together. There's a little bit of both in the Stars and Stripes break strain. You've got that drama of the harmony and the low brass kicking in. You've also got the drama of percussion coming in at certain points to kind of hammer that home. The most important part is not to rush the drama. We want this to feel strong and settled and kind of rooted in the ground, which then sets up the last part of the march. He does it here by going ba-da-da-da-dee, da-da-da-da-dun, ba-da-da-da-dee, da-da-da-da-da. There's these moments where we can kind of stick that fence post in the ground and be really strong with that. And then everything subsides, and we play the last time through the last strain, which is the trio melody again, softly. All of the brass is out again, all of the dynamics are piano, but this time, of course, we have a very famous musical obligato that happens. Let's take the break one more time, and we'll go on to the last strain. 1, 2, 1. Good, thank you very much. So what makes this march sparkle again is in the articulation. And our piccolo players, flute players, they know exactly how to play this obligato. But what if I messed with you guys and made you play it differently than your instincts tell you to play it? Can we try it again and do it again without that bounce? Just make it long and kind of flat. Can we just try it once like that? 1, 2, and ah. Good. And now let's do the opposite. Let's make it very, very staccatissimo and unmusical maybe. 1, 2, and ah. We want to listen to any more of that. Now can you just play it the way you normally will? 1, 2, and ah. There's this wonderful bounce that comes out of that articulation. I like to think of all Sousa notes are like a little rubber ball. So it's round and there is buoyancy to it, there's bounce to it. So whatever surface that ball hits, it is going to react off of it, but you're going to watch it bounce up from the surface and then let gravity take its natural course. Now, obviously, we speed that process up with the music being as fast as it is, but if every note has that bounce, that rubber ball round quality, it changes the entire character of the march. And that's exactly what our musicians do instinctively, but we've worked really hard to achieve that kind of articulation, and that's the thing that makes a Sousa march special. Let's take the last strain. Let's do the pickup into the last strain. So we're doing the break strain one more time, and we're going to go to the very last strain of the trio melody. Here we go. Pickups to the break second time. 1, 2, and 1. Good, so there's a couple things that happen in the last strain of almost every Sousa march, and especially in Stars and Stripes. Number one is that the trio melody that we made smooth and beautiful and song-like now gets transformed into a much stronger, in this case, patriotic or martial version of the tune. So when the brass comes in and plays the version that the clarinets and saxophones and euphoniums played earlier, it does take on a whole new life and a new character, but it's the exact same melody. The other thing that's very clever that Sousa did in this version, in this march, I should say, is bring in a brand new line. I don't know if you've noticed this in your knowledge of Stars and Stripes. We have the piccolo obligato, which we added the first time through the last strain. We've got the main melody that you've already heard from the trio, and now the trombones have a third melody that he lays over the top in this kind of musical layer cake. Sousa was really smart in how he represented his patriotism in his music. And in this particular case, he felt like these three melodies represented the three parts of the country that he knew at the time. The North was represented by the beautiful melody and the trio melody and the clarinets and then the trumpets. The South was represented by this obligato in the piccolos, and then the great expanse of the Wild West was represented finally by the trombones who came in. But musically, it's brilliant how all three of these melodies fit together. And then what we do is we add additional accents in the percussion last time through to put those exclamation points on the march. So thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Digital Rehearsal Hall. We were so happy to share this wonderful piece that we love so much for its 125th anniversary. And now, as a special treat, we're going to play the whole thing uninterrupted.